Well, coming up, Iranian officials say they are now capable of making a nuclear bomb. They've just not decided whether or not they'll do it. The question is this more Iranian bluster enticing the Biden administration to give them more concessions in the effort to restart the Iranian nuclear deal? Also, what were the takeaways from President Biden's Middle East trip?
You're coming under a lot of fire for your fist bump with the Crown Prince. I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to that. But also, how can you be sure that another incident, another murder like Jamal Khashoggi's won't happen again?
Well, God love you. What a silly question. How could I possibly be sure of any of that? I just made it clear, if anything occurs like that again, they'll get that response and much more.
If anything like that happens again, they'll get that response and much more. They'll get what? A fist bump? We'll talk about it with Florida Congressman Mike Waltz, a member of the House Armed Services Committee. And Republican attorneys general scored another victory on Friday when a federal judge in Tennessee blocked the Biden administration's efforts to erase the lines of gender in education and sports. We'll talk with the Attorney General of Montana, Austin Knudsen, in just a little bit. And this aberrant focus on transgendering America has not been limited to schools. The Biden administration has spent $1.5 million in producing transgender programming curriculum for inmates in federal prisons. Now, the question is, how might this turn out? Well, we don't have to look too far. Here's a headline from Fox News over the weekend. Quote, transgender woman who impregnated 2 inmates removed from New Jersey female prison. Now, let me give you the translation. A man masquerading as a woman who impregnated 2 female inmates has now been removed from the state's only female prison. We'll talk about that with Congressman Greg Steube, a member of the House Judiciary Committee. And as families continue to struggle with inflation at record levels, as well as gas prices at record highs, what is the Democratic leadership here in Washington focused on? Well, we've been talking about it. They've been focused on abortion, transgendering America, and now they want to add to that with a vote this week to try and codify into law the 2015 Supreme Court decision redefining marriage. Kana Gonzalez, Senior Director of Government Affairs here at FRC, will have an update for us in a little bit. All right, and finally, what did schools do with the COVID-19 relief funds that were supposed to be used to keep the doors open? That's just one of the many education topics we'll cover with Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies here at the Family Research Council, so you want to stick around for that. The website is TonyPerkins.com. Lots of resources there for you, so I encourage you to visit that site, as well as WashingtonStand.com, where you'll find news and commentary from a biblical perspective. And speaking of the Bible, our word for today comes from our Stand on the Word Bible reading plan, and it's found in Psalm 50, verse 15. Here it is. Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. Now, this promise, coming in the context of a passage where God challenged those who were going through the motions of religion. He said, this promise is to those who will genuinely worship him. To find out more about our journey through the Bible, go to frc.org/Bible. You can also join me each morning, Monday through Friday at 8:44 a.m. Eastern Time for a daily devotion based upon the reading plan. That can be found at TonyPerkins.com or on my Facebook page. The price of oil surged to more than $100 a barrel today after President Biden left the Middle East without securing Saudi Arabia's commitment to increase oil production, a trip that drew criticism from Republicans and Democrats alike. And in other news from the region, yesterday a senior advisor to the Iranian Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said that Iran is technically capable of making a nuclear bomb, but is debating whether to actually build one. With me now to talk about this and more is Congressman Mike Waltz. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee and a decorated Special Forces officer. He serves as the 6th Congressional District Congressman from the state of Florida. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Hey, good to be with you, Tony. Thanks.
So, Mike, let's start with President Biden's trip to Saudi Arabia. It doesn't seem like it was very popular, even with his own party, and it doesn't seem like he's coming home with much to talk about.
Yeah, Tony, I think this is what happens when you just kind of muddle and fuddle around in the middle, which is sadly what the commander-in-chief was doing abroad. I mean, by my estimation, he had 2 main objectives. One was to get the Saudis to pump more oil, And at the end of all the speculation, the end of him getting beat up by the progressives over the Saudi human rights issue, he still walked away with no additional agreement. The Saudis basically said, "We'll think about it and we'll talk to OPEC about it in a couple of weeks," which is just malfeasance on the part of his staff, and again is just showing weak leadership abroad. But the bigger piece, Tony, is Iran. Iran is marching towards a nuclear weapon. Remember, you have to have a missile, the ability to put it on a warhead, and the actual fissile material, which they have been marching towards for years. The Trump administration pulled us out of the disastrous deal that had very little verification and didn't address the warhead and the missile components in order to apply maximum pressure. Now they're this close to a nuke because Biden refused to continue applying maximum pressure. And why should the American people care? Well, one, you're seeing what Putin is getting away with under the threat of a nuclear umbrella and deterrence there. And then two, if Iran declares they have an operational nuke, the rest of the Middle East will want one as well. And we will have a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. And God help us all if the Saudis, the Turks, and half the Gulf states all want them. And then God help Israel as well. So this has to be stopped. The Israelis were very clear. All options are on the table. I wish Biden had been clear as well, because I think the military deterrence option is about the only thing the Supreme Leader might listen to at this point.
So, Congressman Waltz, let me ask you this. Do you believe what they say, that they're right there, just weeks away from being able to put all the materials together to develop the nuclear bomb?
Yeah, so that's a little bit unclear, Tony, and without getting into any in the classified realm, they have been marching towards being able to basically test a nuclear weapon. That is still different than being able to miniaturize it and get it onto an operational, accurate ICBM or even short-range rocket. And those latter pieces are kind of in the classified space. But I can say this. They are very close, and they are marching towards having a fully operational weapon. And the question is, what is Biden going to do about it except throwing money at the problem, which is their default reaction that the Iranians would happily pump into their terrorist networks, happily send to Moscow to buy more sophisticated Russian weaponry that some future American pilot or Israeli pilot may have to deal with, and still fully develop their nuclear weapon.
That's what I want to ask you. What would be the benefit of us at this point, now that they say they're just weeks away? If they want to do it, they can do it. It's what they're saying. What would be the benefit to enter into an agreement with them, release what sanctions are on there, give them more cash, when we know we can't trust them?
Because that's the entire fallacy of the Biden administration's approach. They trust our adversaries. They take what they say at face value with very little oversight. If you look at the original Iran deal, you had to notify the Iranians a month in advance before you come to do an inspection, and then they wouldn't let us even go inspect the military sites. The UN has since found they violated it left, right, and center. The Israelis did it through intelligence means and then taking action on their own, covert action, to at least delay the program. What we need is answers from the Biden administration. And I think the only thing the Supreme Leader, the Ayatollahs, are going to listen to at this point is a credible threat of force. I want to be clear. No one wants military action. No one wants a war in the Middle East. But we also can't live in a world where the Iranian regime has nukes. And Biden and Tony, on top of that, that's also supporting the Israelis and our allies in giving them the weaponry that they've been asking for, and Biden hasn't been giving them.
Congressman, I want to ask you about these increasing relationships between Putin. You made reference to his trip to Iran, as well as his working with China. Are we seeing the development of new axis of evil?
Oh, we absolutely are. The Chinese are buying more Iranian oil than ever. The Iranians are looking at exporting armed drone technology to the Russians. Meanwhile, we're just showing weakness on the world stage. And right to the east of Iran is a Taliban terrorist superstate. Iran's been housing key members of Al Qaeda for years. So you have multiple axes that, one, threaten to wipe Israel off the face of the map, but two, you really have the solidifying of a new axis of evil. And meanwhile, you have Biden offering defense cuts when you account inflation. It's just absurd, and it should make every American afraid, frankly, because this is the world is spinning off into a very dangerous direction.
I think, Congressman Waltz, as I see it, and please, I'm asking you, you're the expert on this, but it appears that, as you said, it's spinning. It's about to spin out of control, but I think we're not quite there yet. Is there intervention? What 3 steps could be taken to begin to get a handle on this situation to keep what we're fearful of happening in the Middle East?
Yeah, well, number one, I think we need to start talking about secondary sanctions on Chinese firms that are supporting Russia and that are helping Iran evade and helping North Korea evade our existing sanctions. The thing the Chinese Communist Party cares about the most is its wallet and its control over its people. And while we still have the largest economy, we need to use that leverage. But instead, we have Biden threatening to lift tariffs, not even asking about COVID origin, and turning a blind eye to Chinese Communist Party aggressiveness. They are the muscle and the money behind a lot of this. And then secondly, we need to make it very clear with Israel that all options are on the table. And when we say Iran cannot have a nuke, we mean it. And that they see that the Iranian regime will see more downside to declaring a nuclear weapon than upside. I think those 2 things will be key. And then finally, I've been fully supportive of Ukraine. They are doing the fighting and dying against the Russian army and really taking them off the table as a viable military threat. But we also need real oversight of the taxpayer dollars that are being spent. And I'm increasingly concerned the Biden administration aren't putting the measures in place to understand where those billions that we're pouring into Ukraine are going.
And of course, that's resources that could be used elsewhere in building up our own military. Congressman Mike
That's
Waltz,
right.
always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us on this Monday afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Tony. God bless.